This is the last full video I'm going to do on an architect from what I call the Brooklyn School. And like Frank Freeman, Raymond F. Almirall is one of the youngest. Born in 1869, died in 1939. He was from Brooklyn, and he's buried in Greenwood Cemetery. And I think he was a really interesting, great architect that most people have not heard of, but he deserves more recognition. He didn't design in the Romanesque way, except for one project, partly because he was younger than the other architects. That was their prime period during the Romanesque period in the late 1880s to early 1890s. Raymond got his first buildings designed in the late 1890s and into the early 1900s. And one of the things is he's sort of like Frank Freeman. He's been victimized or just been unfortunate that some of his projects have not been built or are in ruins. So designed a hospital complex for tuberculosis on Staten Island called Seaview, and I've never been to it, but I've heard it's a spectacular ruin now that they're slowly starting to reuse. It's right in the central part of Staten Island. It's amazing to me that it hasn't been either preserved or reused, that there wasn't a need for it. It wasn't built that long ago. And then another spectacular project that was not built or was only partially built, very strange story. He was the designer of the main Brooklyn Public Library at Flatbush and Eastern Parkway, and it was going to be a building that was going to look like the Brooklyn Museum with a large dome and very spectacular looking, but it was only partially built and then money ran out, and it sat there with the foundation excavated and built and one wing of it built for 30 years until they finally got enough funds to finish it. But by then they had changed architects and they stripped the wing that he built of a lot of its details so that it would match the rest of the building. And I'll show you what the building looks like now. It's still on the National Register of Historic Places, but it's something that if it had been built the way it was originally designed, it would have been really something. And then he also designed a building that I'll show in Lower Manhattan, the Immigrant Savings Bank, which at the time was the biggest bank in the U.S., and it still stands across from City Hall Park. And from what I've read, the city of New York is using it for storage of materials. I thought it had been converted to residential, but they don't know what to do with the main bank lobby. But he has other works that we'll also show in video clips. So I just wanted to show you, these are some of the pictures of some of his projects. The one on the top left is the main Brooklyn Public Library that was only partially built. It was built along the long facade that we're looking at on the Flatbush Avenue side, but the dome was never built. The main entrance and the side along Eastern Parkway was not built. And then another project that's the one that's in spectacular ruins is pictured on the upper right. And you can see it's a whole campus. So he put a lot of time and effort into designing both of these projects. But he also designed other projects that are still standing. So the middle one is a Catholic church in Sunset Park that I haven't taken a look at yet, but I will include a video clip by the time this whole video goes out. And then he designed the really interesting branch library of the Brooklyn Public Library on the lower left. It's called the Pacific Branch. It's on 4th Avenue at Pacific Street in Park Slope. And then the Immigrant Savings Bank is the one in the middle on the bottom that I talked about, still standing, and it's really an interesting building to look at. And then building on the lower right was originally designed as a public bathhouse when there were such things in Brooklyn and in New York, both in Brooklyn and Manhattan, maybe the other boroughs too, I'm not sure. So I just want to conclude with this introduction with pictures of the library that he did design and that was partially built. And I have to say, I studied a lot of architecture in Berlin from the Second World War, the stuff that was designed by Albert Speer, under the Hitler regime. And this kind of reminds me of that. It looks like a ruins after the war. It's just an unfinished building. And it was on that grand scale that Speer wanted to design or redesign Berlin, and he had a lot of drawings that sort of look like this. And then and I'm not saying that in a complimentary way towards Nazi architecture at all. And then the building that was built for the main Brooklyn Public Library is pictured on the lower right, and it's in an Art Deco style from the 1930s, 40s. I think it was finally built. And I've been in this library, and I have to say that compared to the New York Public Library at 42nd and 5th Avenue, this library feels cramped and congested. And maybe that's because it's well utilized, but I don't know. I just wonder if it had had the dome and was on a grander scale, if it would have felt less like that than what does exist today. But what does exist today, people regard as iconic in Brooklyn, but I just feel like it could have been so much better. So let me show you the works of Raymond F. Almirall. And I also will preface the clips before I show them that in the video that I show of the Immigrant Savings Bank, I wind up calling Raymond F. Almirall Frank. And I think that's partly because there are a couple of Franks in the Brooklyn School. There's Frank Freeman, there's Frank Helmley, and there's Francis Kimball. And I never could find out what Raymond Almirall's middle initial F stands for, but I have a good feeling it's Francis, and he could have been a Frank too. So I was a little off, but so forgive that when you watch that part of the clip. Oh, by the way, I mean, one of the other things that's spectacular was, I think, is the interiors of the buildings. So the one on the left is of the Pacific Branch Library, which I have not been in. I now want to go in, having seen this picture. And I know it was under renovation a while back, and I hope they didn't change this too much from the original. And then the Immigrant Savings Bank lobby is on the right, and it looks to be like a picture in the 70s, just based on people's style of dress. And that would be fantastic to go into. I think, as I mentioned earlier, that the city of New York doesn't know what to do with this lobby, but wow, what a lobby, what a wow factor. So his buildings were beautiful on the inside and the outside. This is the first Carnegie Branch Library built in Brooklyn, and it was designed by Raymond Almirall, who was born in Brooklyn. And it's on 4th Avenue at the corner of Pacific Street, right near the Williamsburg Bank building, which is probably the main focal point of Brooklyn. And this was designed and built in 1903. This is 4th Avenue, which has really seen a lot of positive changes in the last couple of years. And Raymond Almirall designed 4 branches, Carnegie branches of the Brooklyn Public Library. He also designed the main central library, but it was never built, or one wing of it was built. So this is at 25 4th Avenue at Pacific Street. And it's been discussed off and on as being a candidate for demolition, but I hope it never is. Raymond Almirall, 1903. Just wanted to show the Pacific Branch Library from across the street. And I see the lights are on. I'm going to take a peek inside. This is Public Bathhouse number 7 on 4th Avenue at President Street. designed by Raymond Almirall. It was built between 1906 and 1910. And it's in the heart of a really growing area here at 4th Avenue, right on the boundary between Park Slope and Borum Hill. So it's occupied by Blink. I'm trying to remember what Blink is. It's either a dating website or a job website or some other kind of website. And we'll walk across real quickly here. So it's kind of the classic revival, Beaux-Arts style. Raymond Almirall, he's from Brooklyn. Everybody claims him. He went to Brooklyn Polytech, as did William Tubby. But Cornell also claims him, and he also went to the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. So you can see the influence on this design. And there was a men's entrance and a women's entrance. And there used to be these public bathhouses all over old New York. There's still some in Manhattan. I think I've been to another one in Brooklyn, but this is the best looking of the bunch. Raymond Almirall, 1906 to 1910, bathhouse number 7 in Park Slope, Brooklyn, 4th Avenue at President Street. Here's another branch library of the Brooklyn Public Library, designed by Raymond Almirall. And we're at the corner of, we're on 6th Avenue, we're at the corner of 9th Street in Park Slope. And above the doorway it says that the Brooklyn Public Library was established in 1897. That was a year before Brooklyn became part of New York City in 1898. And Brooklyn has still kept its own library system separate from the New York Public Library system, which covers 3 boroughs: Manhattan, Staten Island, and the Bronx. And then Queens also has their own public library system. They've never merged the 3. And Raymond Almirall designed this in 1906, so this is 3 years younger than the Pacific branch on 4th Avenue. 431 6th Avenue at 9th Street in Park Slope, Brooklyn. Raymond Almirall, one of 4 Brooklyn Public Library branches that he designed. This is actually called the Prospect branch. It's in Park Slope. There's a separate neighborhood called Prospect Heights. So it's getting confusing, but we're in Park Slope, but this is the Prospect branch at 6th Avenue and 9th Street. And just to show you some more interesting, beautiful buildings here at 9th and 6th. This is an eye-catching red Victorian building on the southwest corner. I was just looking for a year. I don't see one. But I wanted to also take a look at a building right across 8th Street from the Library, which is a Victorian era public grade school. You can see it's got a mini mansard roof with a decorative design on it that sometimes is called the Hudson River School of Design. But there was a chief architect for the Brooklyn Board of Education who lived right up until the year that Brooklyn was merged with New York City. His name was James Naughton, and not to be confused with an actor of the same name. James Naughton was born in Ireland, came to the US, and was responsible for the design of all the schools in Brooklyn in the late 1800s. So there's a good chance PS 39 was one of his designs. And I don't see a year of when this school was built, but it's beautiful, isn't it? And I'm glad it's still a school. Good chance it's more than 100 years old. Kept in good condition. PS 39 on 6th Avenue at 8th Street in Park Slope, Brooklyn. James Naughton, likely the architect. We're going to take a look at Frank Almirall's Lower Manhattan building, the Immigrant Industrial Savings Bank building, which you can see identified on the side of the building. It was built in 1909 and 1912. It's at 4951 Chambers Street, between Broadway and Center Streets in Lower Manhattan. Right near City Hall, which is back there through the trees, and right across the street from the Tweed Courthouse, which back in the day cost way more than it should have due to political graft, people taking money from the budget. And then straight down the street is the impressive Beaux-Arts building, the Manhattan Municipal building by Mckinley and White. And actually it was a building I first worked in when I moved to New York. But back to Frank Almirall's Immigrant Industrial Savings Bank. And I never see anyone go in or out of there. I'm not saying I stand outside this building all day and watch, but it seems like a quiet presence. But it looks fantastic on this inner courtyard here. And let's walk up the steps of the Tweed Courthouse to get a better view of it. I once spent a week working in the Tweed Courthouse. Very underutilized building with some city departments. So this is really Beaux-Arts territory. This is a courthouse here on the corner of Center and Chambers. So Frank Almirall, Immigrant Industrial Savings Bank building
1909 to 1912, 49-51 Chambers Street, Lower Manhattan. There's a lot of details of Frank Almirall's Immigrant Industrial Savings Bank, so I just want to take a little more time to focus on some of them, especially up top where New Yorkers rarely look. So much detail. They say buildings like this would be at home in Budapest or maybe Prague. Frank Almirall, 1909, 1912, in the Beaux-Arts style. One last look at this pretty impressive statue that's way above the street, so few people take a good close look at it. Okay, coming up on last Raymond Almirall building that I'm videoing in Brooklyn, and his latest work in Brooklyn. It's right near the Lincoln Club by Rudolph Douse, which we feature in another video. So this is now the Elim Temple. It's a full block long. It's built in 1915, and it was originally called, it was a Catholic church called the First Church of the Nativity of Our Blessed Lord, 495-513 Classen Avenue in Bed-Stuy, Romanesque style. I think it was the only building that Raymond Almirall designed that was in the Romanesque style. He's more of a Beaux-Arts classicist architect.
Oh, sorry. Come on, guys.
Just the surrounding neighborhood at Madison Street and Classen Avenue. And we'll walk over here and take a look at the front of it. I read one little story where someone was overheard to be talking about being involved with the stripping of all the interior things that had to do with saints and what have you in a regular Catholic church. So it's Catholic on the outside, but not on the inside. Raymond Almirall, 1915. And let's just take a look here at what else is here on Madison Street since we're here. This is probably part of the church complex. And then this is called Archbishop Mckinley Hall. It looks like an old PS, public school, but guess not. There's a range of housing styles on this street, old and new. An interesting street, Madison Street in Bed-Stuy. between Classen and I think Bedford Avenues.